Hello everyone, welcome to yet another video in this, the Clown Decade. The decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And right now we are having even more evidence that the old Ash Sarkar clip...
While the minority population has increased by 1.2 million. So yes lads, we're winning.
turns out to be more popular than we think, but unfortunately it's not just about people of different colour. I mean, that was never really the issue in the first place, as the issue is more about keeping the culture going. So you may as well get right into this one. This all stems from a 5 Pillars UK post saying a flight from Israel to Dagestan, which is in the very southern tip of Russia, bordering Azerbaijan, was forced to divert from its destination in the capital of Makakala earlier today after pro-Palestine protesters stormed the airport to confront the Israeli arrivals. So let's have a quick look at this video. Yes, complete and utter chaos, breaking their way through different parts of the airport, all because they had heard that a flight from Israel was landing at the airport. Anyway, that's all that 5 Pillars decided to post up, which would be bad enough on its own, but Disclosed TV has had this video put up as well, because they made it to the runway. The video then goes into a close-up of a guy speaking in a foreign language. I don't know what it is and I don't understand what he's saying. But either way, as you can tell from all these clips, I mean, if you're storming an airport like that anyway, you clearly do not have peaceful intentions. It is clearly violence that you're intending to inflict upon the people on that plane, and obviously since they are Israeli, it is natural to, and actually safe to say, that they are targeting Jewish Israelis. Anyway, Dilly Hussein, who is the deputy editor of 5 Pillars magazine UK, said this is the kind of welcome all Israelis should be receiving at the airport of Muslim-majority countries. In other words, Dilly Hussein is quite open to the idea of violence against Israeli Jews, whether they have even been involved in the IDF or been involved in the killing of civilians or not. And let's be frank, there have been killings of civilians. It is modern warfare. It is pretty much impossible not to have civilian casualties in the modern day. But either way, wishing that every single Israeli who lands their plane in a Muslim-majority country should have to face this type of intimidation and violence is beyond the pale. It is effectively, not even effectively, it just is openly calling for terrorism and for intimidation against a particular ethnicity, which, believe it or not, doesn't fly very well with modern sensibilities. But for some reason, at least at the time of recording, Dilly Hussein isn't being investigated by any sort of authority and is still allowed to edit 5 Pillars magazine, which is a regulated magazine, by the way. So, anyway, as a result of this tweet, Douglas Murray found it and quote tweeted it saying, "What is this man doing in our country?" And I think that is a very reasonable question. How have we ended up in a position where we are not only just allowing calls for terrorism on Twitter to be just freely put out there, if it is an anti-Israeli call for terrorism, but how did a man like this even end up in the country? But Dilly had an answer to this fair question, and he just replied saying multiplying. I mean, there we have it. If yet again there is anyone out there trying to say, oh, there isn't a demographic issue and there isn't some sort of malicious intent behind some people within this demographic problem, then, well, here we go. This is a man who wants Britain to be a Muslim-majority country and to terrorise Israeli airport passengers, and let's be fair, obviously he wants it to go way beyond that. He wouldn't want a single Israeli Jew in the country, and possibly not even any Jew in the country full stop. which I suppose you could argue is a British tradition if you go back to before Oliver Cromwell's time. However, given that Jews have been living in Britain for over 300 years at this point and have clearly integrated quite well, at least the ones that have been around for a while, then I think it's fair to say that we have British Jews here, and so getting rid of British Jews, but not British Muslims, would be a very strange way to go indeed. So, going to the general New Elite opinion of this whole conversation, I suppose we should have a look and see what the ex-Conservative co-chair and current Conservative peer has to say about this whole situation, Sayeeda Warsi, or Baroness Warsi. And she said in reply to Douglas, both of you, two sides of the same coin, spouting extreme and divisive comments. We in the UK would all be better off if both of you pushed off somewhere else. We don't need this rubbish from either of you. Which is quite an insane, almost centrist position in this scenario, given that there should be no centre in this scenario, really. It is that binary. Where if you are asking how someone can make such an extremist statement and stay in the country is seen as equivalent to that extremist statement, then there's some clear cognitive dissonance going on here. How it is controversial to say we should probably be deporting and not allowing in terrorist sympathisers or terrorists full stop is beyond me, but this is apparently the opinion of people at the very top of the Conservative Party. So, as I keep saying in the run-up to the election next year, if you're going to protest vote, which at this point I would say you should absolutely do, please protest vote for the Reform UK Party rather than spoiling your ballot. It sends a much clearer message. Naturally, both men had something to say about this, so Dilly first said, two sides of the same coin. Douglas is someone who has called for the expulsion of Muslims from Europe. His organisation, the Henry Jackson Society, has been instrumental in shaping the Islamophobic policies and the witch hunt of Muslim activists. He supports Israel's genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, but this is expected from someone who threw Mend Community, a pro-Muslim organisation, under the bus while positively engaging with them in private. Pathetic. Which again, if we're going to go into the nuances of this war, Hamas side went in to specifically kill over 1,000 Israeli Jews. The Israelis have given plenty of time for the Palestinians to evacuate if they do not wish to fight. It is the Palestinian government and military of Hamas that is stopping them from escaping and is even stopping foreign-born people from leaving too. It is a civilian human shield tactic, and if it is their prerogative to try and do that, then, well, as far as I'm concerned, the civilian blood is on their hands. However, I would also like to point out that Dilly is trying to equate and say that calling for terrorists and terrorist sympathisers to be ejected from European countries, or more specifically in Douglas Murray's case, from Britain, for genuinely breaking the law and being nuisances. He is not saying that every Muslim needs to go back, he is saying the troublesome ones need to be deported. That is somehow worse, in his mind, than calling for intimidation and violence against Israeli Jews that are arriving at airports. According to him, every Muslim country should be reacting to an Israeli flight coming in, not even necessarily with full of Israeli Jews on, but flights from Israel should be greeted with what is essentially a lynch mob. Apparently that's not as extreme as saying the people who say that should be deported from polite and civilised British society. So obviously that is an insane position to take, so we'll take a look at the sane Douglas Murray position. Two sides of the same coin. You'd know, wouldn't you, Sayeeda? Having spent the past decade equating the young men and women of the IDF to ISIS, you can jog right on. Which is a tweet I can't help but find myself agreeing with. So that's the example of the Conservative Party saying that we shouldn't even think about deporting people that are promoting calls to terrorism of Israeli Jews, so that's interesting. But what I find even funnier is the new elite of the journalist class. David Aronovich, an old Times columnist and constant BBC panellist, had this to say. Hussein was born in Britain and is a British citizen, and I'm sure if I was born in a stable I would be a horse. He is also an extremist who very carefully treads the legal line, but he can no more be deported than can Murray or can I. Which is just the typical mindset of a new elitist, where the law says X, Y and Z, therefore we're screwed and can't do anything. That is essentially the underlying sentiment of this statement. There's no call for, maybe you're right, maybe we need the laws to change to get people deported, and the reason for that is because it helps the right wing, and for some reason in the modern day, being seen as right wing to especially a lot of new elitists, is just seen as dirty. Because Aronovich isn't even necessarily saying here that Hussein shouldn't be deported. In fact, he's kind of implying that it wouldn't be an awful idea. However, he thinks that for some reason it's year zero in Britain and we can't develop new laws or amend old ones to actually have a functioning justice system, government, and country. He seems to think that because Cthulhu slowly swims left, he has to make Cthulhu swim quicker by only allowing more open borders, less deportations, and hope that creates social harmony. But he's quite clearly implicitly saying here that he knows that there's going to be less social harmony with someone like Dilly Hussein in the country, clearly thinks that deportation wouldn't be an awful thing to do, yet seems to think wrongly, by the way, that because he is born in Britain and therefore a British citizen, which is a stupid law to have in the first place anyway, but because of this, that means that we can't deport him, which isn't even true. Because he is, I believe, a dual citizen, we actually have the power to revoke his citizenship because he wouldn't be stateless. It's exactly what we're doing to Shamima Begum. So David Aranovich is wrong, but for some reason on the side of the terrorist sympathiser, even though he knows that position is evil. It is very, very odd. In fact, while I'm on the subject of Dilly Hussein and his citizenships, it turns out that Five Pillars magazine lets us know that he is in fact a dual national, or at least implies it. Because at the end of his biography, you can see right at the bottom after it says he supports Liverpool FC, because of course he does, it says Dilly is a British-born Bangladeshi raised and residing in Bedford. Now say what you will about multiculturalism, but as far as I'm concerned, if you don't say you are a British person, you are definitely not a British person and should not be a British citizen. The idea of dual nationalities is causing way too many problems. I would just get rid of the idea. If you do happen to be a person born from parents with two different ethnicities, it's possibly a grey area we can talk about there. Perhaps you can choose one or the other you wish to be more reside in, or possibly if there's a deal between the two countries, you can be both. However, when you say British-born Bangladeshi, that is like calling George Orwell an Indian-born Brit. He is a British person, he just happened to be born in another country, but he, George Orwell I mean, is still British. Dilly Hussein is still Bangladeshi. A large part of determining an ethnicity is down to self-determination. If you yourself say you are of a certain ethnicity, then by all means you are of that ethnicity. And if you are self-describing as anything other than British, I don't see a reason we can't deport you to where you say you are ethnically in line with. I don't see why Dilly can't be deported to Bangladesh for being a terrorist sympathiser, because it's right there in writing. Anyway, as mentioned at the beginning, these were images from Five Pillars UK, an online magazine who, according to their website, launched in April 2013 as they felt there still wasn't a quality Muslim community media platform which was independent and professional, so Five Pillars aimed at putting that right. They are primarily a news, opinion and analysis-based website with concentrates on British Muslims news, but also looks to the wider Islamic world. So it is a pro-British Muslim magazine, which I don't necessarily have any problem against in principle. However, from what we can see from the co-editor, he has opinions that probably should definitely actually not be tolerated in Britain. I just want to point out again that this was a man who thought that all Muslims should be making lynch mobs and going to airports to harass, intimidate, and possibly even kill Israeli Jews on airplanes. But this is what the magazine has to say about non-Muslims. We believe in working constructively and living harmoniously with non-Muslims, and we hope they will read and contribute to this website. So, according to the public face about us of the Five Pillars UK online magazine, they want to live peacefully and harmoniously with non-Muslims. That's their take. So then, why is your deputy editor out here saying that non-Muslims, or specifically Israeli Jews, should be met with a very disharmonious and violent lynch mob that is clearly there to, for lack of a better term, do them in? How can you possibly claim that you're a magazine that believes in working constructively and living harmoniously with non-Muslims when you clearly want to be destructive and disharmonious with another certain ethnicity? Especially when it comes from your deputy editor and nothing seems to have been done about it. Clearly, this is a lie. And by the way, it's not just the deputy editor who has the opinion that you cannot have Muslims living harmoniously and constructively with Israeli Jews. As their editor, Roshan Mohammed Salih, as you can see in his bio here at the bottom, he is a mix of Sri Lankan and Welsh heritage. Just putting that out there, that shows that he indeed as well is perfectly valid to deport. However, we may as well look at some of his tweets. All Muslims must cut ties with Israel supporters. So apparently, according to the editor as well as the deputy editor, you cannot live constructively and harmoniously with Israeli Jews. It's simply impossible. They're going against their 5 pillars mission here, and either they don't know it or they are just full-on liars. I am tempted to go with the latter there. In this tweet he goes a little further. I do not respect so-called liberal Israelis or left-wing Israelis, etc., who are criticising the current regime actions in Gaza. As far as I'm concerned, all Israelis are illegal settlers, and if they are so sympathetic to the Palestinians, they should simply leave the land and give it back to its rightful owners. And I assume if that's not going to happen, Roshan, there's not particularly going to be any constructive or harmonious living with Israelis and Palestinians. Don't think we are going to respect you just because you say a few good things. You're still living on stolen land. Which, just to give you a quick rundown of Israeli history, effectively what happened was, as there are already Jewish settlers in the current lands of Israel, the UN said to the neighbouring Arab countries, look, here's a deal, the British are leaving, they're no longer in charge of it, we're going to have an Israeli Jewish state here. That was much smaller than Israel is at the moment. And obviously, as soon as that ultimatum came, the Arabs fought the Jews won. And effectively, it has just been constant tensions from surrounding Arab countries, constantly antagonising Israel, who have been a legally recognised country since their inception. What the hell are Israel supposed to do other than defend themselves? You can call it stolen land all you want, but if you're trying to call it stolen from Palestinian land, you are dead wrong. Palestine was never even a country. So if it was never a country, how can it possibly have had its country's land stolen? But either way, the point being is that Roshan clearly doesn't believe that you can actually have Muslims living harmoniously with non-Muslims, and the further we read into these tweets, the further we realise that this is actually the case, not just for Israeli Jews, but for all non-Muslims. I am personally convinced Britain would become a majority Muslim country in 150 years or so if a natural process of birth rates, immigration and conversions were allowed to happen. Islam is so obviously a superior ideology to Western civilization that it would be inevitable, but I am also convinced that the British state and many of its people will do anything to prevent it from happening. Yes, I can't think why. Their preference is to dilute Islam and Muslims' adherence to it, but if this cannot be done, they will not hesitate to use force. So just to reframe that entire tweet, what Roshan, the editor of 5 Pillars UK online magazine, the pro-Muslim magazine of Britain, is saying here is that he reckons that Muslims will slowly take over Britain, not only demographically, but also religiously, thanks mainly in part due to birth rates and immigration, hence they were the first two choices, and then conversions. But honestly, there are conversions going on towards Islam, but it is not particularly at an alarming rate. I still think that we are having more people baptised in this country than converting to Islam. However, he clearly has a problem here at the end in this last sentence. The preference is to dilute Islam and Muslims' adherence to it. And the implication here, again, is that Muslims and British values, whatever you want to call them, are clearly not coherent. They can't live harmoniously, and that's why they will not hesitate to use force. And again, the implication to Muslims here is that you have to fight back against that. Keep your Muslimness, if you will, and fight back against the British that clearly don't want it. And the thing is that is exactly what is happening anyway. You look at the weekly marches we're seeing in London, where the police are trying to claim that they can't arrest protesters that are going outside of the allowed protest zone, and those firing off flares, which are illegal, by the way, in public places. And you will see them instead trying to get people with St. George flags and people coming out of pubs to tell them to go away. You will see them arresting them or moving them away and effectively stepping on the Brits of the country, or at least the non-pro-Palestine ones, in favour of the pro-Palestinian foreigners and leftists. Because this appears to be a homegrown problem as much as it is a foreign one. There is no way you would fix this problem overnight if you deported absolutely terrorist sympathiser in the UK. You would still have a large section of the British public, we're talking somewhere between 15 to 25%, who would still be implicitly in favour of Hamas, all because they think the Palestinians are being oppressed. When in reality, constantly raising wars and constantly being aggressive to your neighbour only to have them steamroll you over and over again is not being oppressed, it is being insane. And personally, I am not for the side of insanity. Hence I made this YouTube channel, and hence I put my opinion out there as much as I can. But the conclusion of this video is that all you have to do is ask why are terrorist sympathisers here, to then find the people who, whether through pure ignorance or pure malice, are on the terrorist side as well, and the terrorist sympathisers side as well. You do a little digging into them as well, you end up finding way worse things being said, and their implicit plans for not only coming over here, but also staying here. Though in defence of the editor of Five Pillars, it seems that he was actually born here and does actually have a Welsh parent. I do find it amazing how there are quite a lot of people in the public eye who have mixed heritage and only ever seem to be anti-British heritage and pro-foreign heritage, while still explicitly living in the United Kingdom, probably because it's a better country than the other half of their ethnicity. What we do about these people, I don't particularly know. But what I do know is that if you are a terrorist sympathiser, you do deserve jail time at the very least. You do not deserve to be part of polite society. And Hamas are those terrorists. The people at that airport who were trying to intimidate Israeli Jews are terrorists. If you have sympathies for them, that you deserve to be investigated, you deserve to be charged, you deserve to be punished. We cannot have that type of thing in Britain. But with that, that's everything I had for you today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.